located in the Sacramento Delta with the structures that rested on that property. At that same time, the action of the board created two different organizations, the Locke Management Association and the Locke Foundation. The purpose of the Locke Management Association was to essentially own, manage, and maintain the common areas in the town of Locke, the parking lots, garden area, and walking easements, and to levy and collect monthly assessments to take care of the assets that I just mentioned, along with liability insurance. The purpose of the Locke Foundation, which was also created at that point in time, was to serve as a fundraising and marketing and promotion organization, recognizing the historical identity of the town of Locke and to provide resources for its future. On that, with that action in April of 2003, the bylaws were established for those two bodies, for the Locke Foundation and the Locke Management Association. The composition for those bodies was established at the time, along with the structure for modification for those bylaws, if at some point in the future, those bodies, along with those that they represent, saw fit to make modifications to those bylaws. The protocol for modification of those bylaws included certain triggers that would see actions necessary to be considered by the Board of Supervisors if they were looking to make changes in those respective bodies. For example, change in composition of the Board of Directors for either organization would require an action of the Board of Supervisors. And so in February of 2019, the Board of Supervisors was presented with proposed revised bylaws for each of those bodies, the Locke Foundation and the Locke Management Association, which were generated by those bodies themselves, engaging with the property owners of Locke as defined in the bylaws for those bodies. On that date in April of this year, the Board of Supervisors did approve the Locke Foundation bylaws, in February of this year, the board did approve the proposed bylaw changes for the Locke Foundation, and then directed that county staff conduct a poll to gain insight as to the Locke community, the property owners' position regarding their agreement with the proposed bylaws to the Locke Management Association bylaws. And that poll was conducted, and I'll walk you through the results of that in just a moment. I did want to circle back to a key point as reflected in the bylaws. When there are changes proposed to the Board of Supervisors, in essence, the board has to consider those bylaw changes as proposed, in that the Board of Supervisors cannot unilaterally change or direct changes to the bylaws as proposed. It's in essence an approval or a denial of the bylaw changes as presented by the respective body. And so again, on February 5th of 2019, the board approved the proposed bylaw changes as submitted by the Locke Foundation, and then requested that county staff conduct a poll regarding the position of Locke property owners on the bylaw changes that were proposed by the Locke Management Association. And so I'm going to share with you the results of the poll that we did conduct, and then recommend that the board ask Russell Ooms, the chair of the Locke Management Association, to come forward and describe the process that the Locke Management Association pursued to develop those bylaws along with the changes themselves. And so the results of the poll question, it was a single question that we proposed to the property owners in the town of Locke. Do you agree with proposed revisions to the Locke Management or L.M.A. bylaws? Circle yes or no. And so a poll was sent to, this question was sent, certified mail return receipt to 49 property owners in the town of Locke. The recipients were identified through collaboration by clerk of the board staff with the assessor's office, and then also correlating with the Locke Management Association with their records. So there were 49 recipients. The poll was sent, single sheet poll with that question I mentioned, which is included as an attachment to the report. 49% certified mail return receipt. There were 4 of the 49 were not signed for or received and came back to the clerk's office, bringing us down to 45. At the time that the board report that's being presented to you today went final, there were 5 that were signed for but not received by the deadline date of March 15th, 2019. And of those that were received, 23 responded with a yes, that they agreed with the proposed changes to the Locke Management Association bylaws, and 16 said no, they did not agree. Then we did receive 2 responses after the March 15th deadline. One of them was able to reflect in the report, and that was a yes vote, bringing the total yes votes to 24. And then there was another response received since the report was published and went final, and that was a no vote. So essentially the final numbers were 24 responding yes and 17 responding no. And so that summarizes the response. Again, that question was, do you agree with the proposed revisions to the L.M.A bylaws? 24 yes, 17 no. In preparation for the meeting today, notices of the meeting were posted at the Locke Boarding House bulletin board in the community of Locke, and also down at the Walnut Grove Library. And then hard copies of the board material were also delivered to each of those locations.
When was that posted? When was the posting?
Well,
I believe it was April the 5th.
Okay, so more than 72 hours ago.
Correct.
Okay.
and then when the board materials for today's meeting became public, hard copies were provided to in each of those locations for individuals to pick up. This is the same protocol that we followed with each of the hearings as we proceeded through this process. And then also on that meeting notice, there was a link provided for anybody that wanted to access the material online. And so that concludes my presentation, and would suggest that perhaps the board ask Russell Ooms to talk about the process that the Locke Management Association went through to develop these proposed bylaws, and then also the changes themselves.
Okay, my name is Russell Ooms. I am the current chairman by default of the Locke Management Association. I bring with me the information that was provided for everyone in town. It was disseminated by the Locke Boarding House where we all meet, and it was there for anyone to take, and I'm sure that the notifications the county did were over the top. So, pretty simple, the changes, we're changing the membership from 13 to 9 to make the board make it easier for people to show up. With a 13-member board, it was always difficult getting people to show up. And the other thing is that the county is losing their seat, and we're taking away 2 seats of from the Chinese cultural organizations, and we're taking away the state park seats. None of those seats have been filled in, I think, 4 or 5 years, some 6 or 7. So we've been working with a 13-member board, but only 9 people actually are seated. So we've worked there. So that's about it. we will now, I understand, I did not know this, we did not know this, that we would not be under the Brown Act. We thought we were going to, even after these changes, the Brown Act would still apply. So now we're going under Davis-Sterling. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a very onerous, very complicated, accountable system. So we are more accountable. And again, we're a volunteer, unpaid, yet still liable for fines, and we hold ourselves accountable to the members of the L.M.A, which are the building owners. The reason I think there are 53 separate buildings, and every building has a vote. So some people own 5 buildings, so they get 5 votes. That was the way it was set up. I do, and I don't look forward to being under the Davis-Sterling. I hope to have a seminar with an accountable firm to come down and teach us Davis-Sterling. One thing to note, 13 years ago when the board set us up, we were given bylaws, CC&Rs, that were written by a committee of 8 or 10 people that met for a year. Don, you were a part of that committee. But after that, we had no direction. No one told us about Robert's Rules of Orders. We didn't even know what the Brown Act was until 5 or 6 years later. And the early chairman who ran it, the meetings, as I said, would last 6, 7 hours with people screaming and hollering, and there was no formality to the meeting. So that's what we've done. We've come up to speed, we run it very efficiently, and there's another thing is there's a lot of misinformation out there that no one comes to us to speak. And I wish that they would talk to the principals, to the directors, but they don't. They don't come to the meetings, they don't come, a lot of people. But a lot of people do, and we've learned that they're in agreement and they support us. And I think that's why the vote went the way it did, because people who agree don't talk, and the people that do don't, they do. So, any questions?
Question? Lisa, and I'm afraid I can't read your names. Kirk? Thank you.
So I've been a business owner on Locke for 13 years, started, and the one that wrote the district attorney about the Brown Act because they weren't following it. I don't attend meetings because they've never understood the Brown Act, and nobody has ever enforced it, so I gave up a long time ago. Before you today, I am asking that you retain a county appointed person. For 13 years, I've hoped that someone would fix the sidewalks. Instead, we got involved with lawsuits. It is vital that you keep a county appointed person on this board because they don't understand or know what to do. They've said that to you 1,000 times. The sidewalks are essential. If this becomes a homeowners association, no one is going to give them money to repair the sidewalks. Right now, you've had taxpayers pay for the county lawyers to tell them how to get out of what you created into a private homeowners association. That's bizarre. You need to keep the seat. Also, in the article, I think it's Article 12, the memberships, even if they go to Davis-Sterling, those members that pay this assessment don't even get to vote on the amended changes. That poll you sent it out to people that don't pay the assessments. There are 3 business owners, 1 business owners in Locke. They didn't get that poll. We don't own property. We have no say. But you didn't even, if you want, make them go back to their membership and get a real vote of these changes to the amendments. And I would suggest they change, I think it's Article 12, that would let the membership vote on these changes. Because, that didn't happen. Polling, you have people paying money each month, for them to do something, and it's not being done, like the sidewalks, some of the common area problems. We don't really know. Plus, you gave them $60,000 in seed money. If they're going to go to a private ownership, ask that they pay it back. If your intent is to make them a homeowners association, which is a common interest development / public entity at this point, if they're going to go back to private, make them pay back that money.
Ms. Kirk, could you wrap up, please?
All right. So, I'm just asking you to keep account, even if you do it for 1 more year, and at least we can look at a sidewalk project. Thank you.
Thank you. Deborah Mendel?
Yes, hi, I am current secretary of the Management Association, the Board of Directors, and I'm a resident and a property owner. And I see, I have a few residents, neighbors here today. I'm glad they showed up today. I'm disappointed that they haven't showed up to any meetings. The Board of Directors, we really work hard on, looking at our bylaws. And, honestly, it was after the county asked us to in conjunction with the foundation's changes. So we've done the best we can, and we really appreciate all the work that Rob's office did, the volumes of paper that have been distributed throughout the county and locally. A lot of work's been put into it. I'd just like to address some of the issues that I'll expect to be brought up maybe by some people who showed up today, which is oversight, maintenance, and lawsuits. And it's really unfortunate that we've been short of funds because one person continues to sue us, continues to sue the association as a whole, and attacking individual directors. And that's really most unfortunate. It's just been holding back community progress. I do see a light at the end of that tunnel. And so that is connected to maintenance. And a lot of maintenance has been done by volunteers because we just haven't had the funds to keep up with maintenance issues. So I expect with the lawsuits over soon, cross my fingers, that maintenance will pick up. And oversight, I do believe, if I'm understanding what the county has been informing us, and June Howells Mays has said that Brown Act will not be relevant, but David Sterling will be, that we will have many, many onerous laws to follow. And we look forward to that. And if the board decides that our changes are not sufficient or incorrect, then I would hope that you'd come up with some other answers. Because we're open.
Thank you. Ms. Esch?
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Thank you so much for hearing me. However, Mr. Leonard, I brought to your office yesterday an objection, and I wrote an objection on my public forum of any discussion of this matter, asking that you table it because it is a Brown Act violation. And I informed you, Mr. Leonard, and I informed the people in the lobby in Mr. Napoli's office yesterday that no posting has been made publicly on the board in Locke for this meeting. I have a photograph I took yesterday at 4 p.m. If you'd like to see it, I could show it to you, of the posting board, still showing the February 5th posting for the meeting that was in this room on February 5th. No posting has been made for this meeting. It is a Brown Act violation. There should be no discussion had. But since you're taking everybody's discussions and it's already Brown Act violations, let's keep going. Could you please show this on your screen for me? There are 26 voters in the general membership of Locke Management Association. 26 voters. There are here.
It's upside down.
Oh, okay. Thank you. There's a big math problem here. There's 26 or 25 members, 26 now, I believe. But 53 polls, according to your staff report. Mr. Leonard, you said there were only 49 polls that were sent out, and then another 4. It was confusing on your staff report, page 3 of your staff report. Anyway, even if there were only 49 polls sent out, there's only 38 assessed properties in Locke. Some of them are not assessed, and don't pay any property taxes. The State Park Museum doesn't pay any, it pays 0 in property taxes, and it has 0 assessment, has no vote on Locke Management Association matters. Mr. Chu's 3 museums have no assessment tied to them, so there should be no votes for those 3 either. We can't figure out who got 28 extra polls or 14 extra polls if you count parcels. Perhaps, now, your list, mailing list shows that nine parcels on the mailing list are for Common Ground of Locke Management Association. Who got those votes? Who got to cast ballots in my name and in my neighbor's name? Was it Ms. Mendel and Mr. Ooms? Because we know how they want to vote. They want to privatize and to have free run and no oversight whatsoever. We ask that
Can you write
this
down?
board, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Please, do not change the bylaws as proposed to you today. Do not change them. It'll throw us all under the bus.
Thank you. That's the last public comment.
No, there's more people in here in Locke
Well,
that,
I have no more cards that have been turned in.
well, maybe they didn't know.
Well,
Mr.
if anyone
Moraes
would
and
like to-
Mr.
if anyone
Howard.
would like- If ma'am, please, if anybody would like to speak, please fill out a card, and I'm more than happy to entertain you at the dais, or at the podium. Thank you. And if you could fill out a card afterwards and give it to the clerk for the record, that would be very helpful. Okay, thank you.
My name is Ying Ho, Ninghou, and I've been living in Locke for 23 years with my wife, Patricia Conway. And we moved in there in 1990 for a long time. And the reason I usually don't go to the meeting since 2003, and I found out the association there, Locke Association and Locke Foundation, doing a lot of things, make all the neighbors not very happy, and I'm not very happy. And recently, they removed my fence. The fence belonged to the founder of the town, Ping Li, and his family. They are the original founder of Locke. And the garden space I've been using very often because I don't know, you can investigate. I am a world-renowned artist, and my favorite subject is irises. They've been stolen, taken my irises out, taken off my fence, and also they didn't do any improvement. And I think they spent a lot of money for our association fee to sue the individual person, and that person was a female. And I think Locke, if we continue without a supervisor from county, I think it will be in danger. And I don't remember Locke looks like a Texas Waco. And I think that there's a bunch of white supremacist people there. And I'm very angry with that, because I'm working for President, Governor, and Lieutenant Governor for past 11 years. And I never raised about those questions to the governors. And in the Capitol, it used to be all my painting to represent the United States. And I hate to say it, I was a renowned #1 artist in the world, and they just burning my backyard, basically. I have no supply, so my garden was lost, and I don't know what to say. I only want to say 3 things. I want the county to involve with supervisor. I don't think that a lot of people there have the ability to lead the town, to unite everybody. And I know it used to be Chinatown, but it never be Chinatown.
If you could make your final 2 points.
Okay, 3 points. Number 1 point, we need a supervisor from county. And number 2, I write down here. Only 3 points. Number 2, I never had a chance to choose the leader for either association leader by my wishes, and I never had a ballot to vote. Number 3 is I really deny, like the master said, deny by law. And that means we have Locke is not just a Chinatown. Locke belongs to Sacramento County, and I don't think the local people can do a good job.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else in the public that would like to address the board at this time? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board. Mr. Natoli.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to thank our staff for their follow through with regards to, as requested from this board, supported in our February discussion, the posing the question to folks and doing it in a way that obviously trying to reach as many folks with notice and certainly with some lead time to respond. What did I say too? I'm very respectful of that process, and there have been obviously other pieces of information that have been submitted as a part of what we've all received here leading to today's discussion. And I think one thing is apparent to me, and I'll get to the bylaws in just a second, is that there's a fairly deep division within this community. It's reflected in the vote, it's reflected in comments I think that folks have received, my colleagues, both written and potentially by phone. But I think that there's still a common theme here. People want good for that community. They recognize the significance, certainly culturally, historically, the viability of its everyday daily life in the town of Locke, and something I think that was very, very important to this board and has been since times when we entertained what we could do to support its physical infrastructure, i.e. With the reuniting of the land with the buildings that had been a part of the, I think, historical scar on Locke. This board, and certainly working with the housing development agency at the time, and community members, property owners, and business owners, and other cultural organizations within the county worked very, very hard. Many community meetings, and certainly a good deal of input. And out of that came part of what we're talking about here today, and that was a design at the time to provide for self-governance with a cross-sectional representation of property owners, of business owners, cultural organizations, and then the county of Sacramento and at the time state parks. Obviously, people have spoken here to it today and in past meetings. It's been clear that some of those seats, there's no denying it, have either been vacated and or have stood vacant for a period of time. And again, I want to certainly compliment our staff. I know that Mr. Leonard and certainly Ms. Palamé, Sacramento County Council's office have been of assistance in attempting to gather the information, certainly to take the input from the Management Association representatives currently serving on the board, but also the townspeople and other community members. It's kind of hard to believe, but it's been well over a year since we had two community forums, and obviously we've had this on our agenda a couple of times since then. And so, as I reflected on this, so listening to today's testimony and recognizing, I think, the good work, I don't never want to disavow that, the good work that's occurred over time, and some of the improvements to the town of Locke, and obviously the engagement by members of the community, that I am not prepared, I'll just say this, to basically sever the tie with the Management Association, at least at this juncture. And again, I respect reflection in the vote that was, or just a poll that was taken, vote as in poll was taken. But I think that the county has tremendous responsibility with the creation of this association. Obviously, having a seat there, it needs to be filled, and if this board agrees, then I'm prepared to make a nomination for this board, obviously, to fill that seat. But I think the deep divisions as reflected in what we have here, some of those might not ever go away, but part of it is the transparency. It goes to, again, I'm not a scholar of David Sterling, nor necessarily of the Brown Act, but I understand the Brown Act and its functions. And I think that's an important part, because it's allowed for, as raucous as it may have been, as difficult as it may have been, it's allowed for public discussion, debate, and it has some requirements to go with it relative to posting and to noticing, and those have been challenged. And again, I certainly want to recognize that you know, if we aren't experts in it, to expect the community to be expert in it is probably unrealistic expectation. But I think the general adherence to the Brown Act is important. And I know that Ms. Palme pointed out in the last hearing that it certainly has some similarity in its requirements. But I think that at this juncture, and you know, you might argue that at any point in time that it's pivotal that we do something or not. Again, this has been, you know, many months, if not a couple of years, in getting before us. And I guess one thing that struck me today was that we can't unilaterally change bylaws. I recognize that, I respect that. I think that having some discussion, and I certainly prepared to get into, if this board would like, to delve into a bit of the detail, to say some of the things that I think that, you know, at least from my perspective and from what I've heard from folks, probably would find favor with a good majority, if not majority of the folks. But I think this is essential that the county's continued involvement via a standing seat. Again, I don't disagree it should be filled, and certainly take some responsibility with regards to that as the supervisory district. But I do think that, you know, some of the elements here that were built in relative to descendancy and ascendancy, I think had a good intent behind them. May not have certainly played out the way that it was anticipated, and put a certainly fairly heavy burden requirement on the L.M.A. and its membership in order to accomplish those things. But I do think that as it relates to election of officers, as well as election to the board, or selection to the board as being proposed here for the terms, those are essential elements. And it goes to this self-governance. And again, there was no tried and true recipe for how we're going to do this. And I think that it was certainly an honest and a solid attempt to do that, recognizing that maybe in reality it's been, you know, every bit as challenging as anyone can imagine. But I don't think that warrants the county's stepping away at this point in time. And again, that's one of the essential elements, obviously, what the L.M.A. working through their community forum and their process has brought to us. And for that point alone, I would send this back to the L.M.A., recognizing that it has to be initiated at that level. I think that it would be done certainly in good faith to you know, continue conversations with the community, certainly with the L.M.A. representation, and maybe, and with another detail element here, that the community organizations, the cultural organizations that were reflected as part of that, that if that's handled by one representative versus three, then that may be acceptable as well. Obviously, state parks made it clear a long time ago they weren't going to serve in that capacity. So I think that some restructuring is probably very appropriate, but I also think it's appropriate at this time. Again, you know, that might be against even some of the legal advice we received, that the county created this, and we stay engaged and involved. And obviously, it's required a lot of staff time thus far, but I think with the divisions that are there, I don't know if those are going to be healed by anything that this board would do, either through an appointment or otherwise. But I do think that us maintaining that connectivity is very, very important at this juncture, and it's not inappropriate. We had this discussion, but I do think there were a lot of, as one of the speakers referenced, there were a lot of public dollars that went into the infrastructure, as well as to I think some of the improvements that have gone on there is complemented obviously by some of the private investment and some of the nonprofit investment that's been on the town. But I know, and the board members, and I've heard from folks, again, some of the things that Ms. Mendo spoke to, that this, you know, need to maintain, you know, the sidewalk areas, some of the common areas, and the challenges presented by having a fairly small pool of folks by which you draw the assessments from to accomplish that, and then in light of other things that have to tax their abilities as it relates to the use of the monies that they do collect. But there is a structure that I think can and should function, and it may be that sending this back, that and certainly respecting the association and the membership and the poll as we received it. But to conclude my law is that there is still a deep division, and that the county should maintain this connectivity to this association and keep the Brown Act coverage that has been in place from the get-go, and that structure when it needs to, certainly to open meetings responsibilities. And so with that in mind, and get more detail I can, but I think we should today not approve what's before us, and particularly in light of the county seat, but with some suggestions as to the Brown Act and such. And that's what I view this morning. I'm prepared to make a motion at some point in the conversation.
So before I could sort of cross, Supervisor Natoli, are you asking for this to be voted down today, or are you asking for a continuance most likely?
Well, the way it was by Mr. Leonard was that we was either up or down. I'm prepared to send it back to the association. I don't want to be harsh and, just saying, it's how I reject everything that's before us, because there are elements, as I spoke to briefly, Mr. Chair, that I think are acceptable. They certainly reflect, the process, and are not areas that I've heard, at least at this juncture, contest over. There are other elements that some of which I spoke to, which are, and I think in that light, if it's totally up or down, and maybe Tracy, you can weigh in, then I don't know, we have anything, I guess we can continue it, it hasn't, without just saying, we reject it, and has to do some more work on it, that way we retain it here, so.
Okay, guys.
Thank you, Chair Kennedy. It is an up or down vote. It is either accept and pass or reject, and then it would go back. The rules would remain as they are now. The bylaws would remain as they are now. It is really that simple. It cannot be, if you continue it, I'm not sure what that discussion will entail or what you'll gain from that.
Well, I don't know that it would entail any different discussion than if it goes down and we have to come. I mean, we're not at the drawing board, but we're.
If it goes down, the bylaws remain as they are. The county would remain part of the board. The bylaws would remain as they are now, not amended. And they would have to start all over again if they want to try to amend them.
Could we not remand it back to them?
You can make suggestions, certainly.
Yeah.
By rejecting, on the up or down vote, by rejecting, that is in effect a remand to them. It does go back to them, and then it is up to that body to make a decision on where they move next.
Okay, I understand. Supervisor Foster, do you don't mind indulging me for 1 minute?
No, sure.
Thank you. I guess I was prepared to come here and support this for a number of reasons. One is, we've heard it so many times, and so much time has been put into it. But out of respect to the supervisor who represents the district and is most familiar with it in the area, I am prepared to let this go another iteration. But what I really, really hope that we don't see is that, if this comes back to this board, I'm voting next time. This is just getting, in my mind, it's ludicrous that this is dragging on and on. And what I would ask of my colleague, showing the adept ability to cut very difficult deals like in South Mather, where you had even more warring factions than you do here, I think, in many ways. You crafted through community input and negotiations something that was palatable to all sides, and I commend you for that. So with those abilities, I hope that you will infuse yourself into this so that we don't have to have this drag on. I've only seen it for 5 years, any longer than it has to. Supervisor Frost.
If I could just respond to that. I'm certainly willing and have been, again, I think we've taken different steps, and part of it was getting to us and broke the foundation of it, the last iteration of this, and so I'm prepared to do that, is sit, and we'll sit in a very public setting and have that conversation and continue with respect to the L.M.A. board, as well as the citizenry and property owners, and to, look at what they craft. Again, it has to be a product of the L.M.A. in order for us to act on. That's, and that was kind of interesting take on all this, but I am prepared to do that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Supervisor Frost.
I have a question relating to the process, the process that we went through. I guess there were some postcards or a letter that was mailed out to all the community members, and there was a person who spoke publicly and stated that the number of communications that were sent out was far greater than the amount of residents, and it was sent out to people that were not appropriate to be voting members. I wondered if you could speak to that, because it sounds like the board was happy to make the changes based on the fact that a lot of those members on their board were not attending the meetings, and so they were having trouble getting, a quorum and having trouble with involvement with the board, but also based on your report that you gave, tell me if I misunderstood it, it sounded like the board was in favor and the community was in favor based on the voting that we received back. And so I can support what Supervisor Natoli wants since it's his district, but I wonder if we're superseding a democratic process of sorts, but if we can actually do that.
Well, the poll that was done as requested by the board was purely advisory in nature. There was no legal requirement for that. It wasn't a defined part of any structured process. It was simply to poll or ask the question as to community, and in this case property owner support for the bylaw changes that had been prepared through the process of the L.M.A. administered. Pure and simple. And so with that, we saw the responses, as I mentioned, to 24 to 17, 24 in favor of the proposed bylaws as prepared by the L.M.A. through a process that engaged with the community, versus 17 that were opposed to that. And that is simply advisory to your board in your consideration of the bylaws. So in regards to the numbers, I really can't comment on that. If just doing the simple math at the top, if you take 49 that were sent out, and then there were 4 that were with no confirmation received back by the board, the numbers start to line up. But I can't speak to the specifics. I haven't had the opportunity to understand the Esch analysis versus.
But this is a private management association.
That's correct.
And they voted to change their bylaws, but I guess because we've been involved over time and we were part of the original formation, we have to approve everything this private management association does.
That's correct, because the Board of Supervisors acted to create those first bylaws back in 2003. And those first bylaws did include a protocol or a process for if at any point in the future that body, either the Locke Management Association or the Locke Foundation, wanted to change their bylaws, if certain changes were to be proposed, those bylaws, which were approved by the board in 2003, said that those bodies would have to come back to the board for the board to conduct a hearing and approve the change in bylaws. So that's essentially what's happening, what has been happening.
And what was the vote on the board again? I'm sorry. For the change of the bylaws, was it a unanimous? No, the board, the 9-person board.
Unanimous.
Yeah, maybe.
It was unanimous that the board wanted to change it?
Yes.
Okay.
There is much intentional confusion about this issue, and it's really hard to watch it.
I'm confused, I'm
But
sorry.
I know you are, and I understand why you are. There are 50 buildings. That's why there are 50 votes. And that's why, no doubt, they sent out 50 polls. But of those, I believe there are 32 owners of those buildings. So really, 1, 2, 3 people could constitute 15 votes. There are people that own 5 buildings.
I got it.
So that's what confuses the vote. It's just very hard. I sat down in 2003 with Don Natoli and told him in his office that this was great and wouldn't work. And we sat there for an hour, went back and forth, because I could see what was happening. It's unwieldy, 13 people. It doesn't work. And what's happening now is one person is creating the narrative for this town. One person, and that's what we've been involved with. The SPA was changed because of this one person. We're here because of this one person. We're in court because of this one person. All the legal filings, we've had 5 lawsuits because of one person. So this is one person. This entire room right now is being consumed. Our time. You have any idea how much time? I mean, I have to dress, change, come here. I mean, I'm doing this for free. You guys are paid, okay? So one person is created it. So I'm really looking forward to having a private board governed by David Sterling that we can bring our members in and not be intimidated by social media with this man here. This man has come to every meeting and photographs us. I once stood there with 3 cameras on me. I'm in a little box in Locke with 3 cameras, video cameras. Every word I'm saying right now, this will be posted tonight. And I don't know what the heading, he usually videotapes us. And nothing controversial happens at the meeting, and the heading will be county, the board, L.M.A. board does something nefarious. We are intimidated.
I think.
Okay, so you get what we want. And I don't know why Don is not on our side. I do not know. And the people that spoke today, we don't talk to. They don't come to meetings.
Okay.
They have their own
I
mind.
think I made your point. Thank you.
Yeah, I got my point. Thank you.
I think I'll, for now, just sit back. I think Don is on everyone's side. He wants it to be equitable. That's the impression what I know about Supervisor Mentoli. So I'll defer to the next person.
Supervisor Peters.
Thank you. I have been on this board since 2005, and this has been an issue since then. And we have had meeting at the Board of Supervisors, not all the meetings that the 2 organizations have, meeting after meeting, people screaming at each other. And I think the process was flawed when the 2003 action was taken in good faith, but it just set the scenario for people to be mad at each other. And I think we've heard about it enough. And I think also until the organization goes on its own and doesn't have the Board of Supervisors to run to, which delays everything and confuses it. Obviously, some people, the stories are so different, you know someone is not telling the truth. And I think once you're on your own, you would be able to figure this out. We had a vote of the landowners. Someone mentioned tenants didn't get to vote. Well, tenants don't vote because it's landowners that get to vote on something like this. It was 24-17. To me, that's a clear majority, and I would move to approve this proposed Locke Management Association bylaw change.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'd like to hear from Supervisor Mentoli.
Well, you can second the motion if you like, and just we have a motion on the floor. We need either a second or it dies by lack of a second. Supervisor Mentoli.
I certainly appreciate the sentiments of all my colleagues, and this isn't a matter of taking sides. I'm very concerned about the future of Locke. Locke has been here long before anybody in this room was, for the most part, born, not in totality, and secondly, be there a long time after I left this board and probably passed on. But I think my concern has been is that if we're going to exit, because what this vote equates to today is the fact we took up Supervisor Peters' motion, then we basically, the L.M.A. is telling us, you're out, and then we say we want to be out. If that's what we want, then we certainly can choose to do that. But we did it all in for a long time. Now, the day-to-day irritation and friction and what goes on in the meetings and so forth, I get it. That wears on people, and whether it's people in this room or others that aren't here, and it certainly wears on my colleagues, as we've heard this many times over the years. Bottom line, though, Locke is a very important place. It's a place where people live, where they work, business enterprises, we have artists, we have folks who are very talented, who are very creative. And it has a very, very important place in our history, in our culture, and certainly in the day-to-day life of the Delta. And some of the very same folks here today want to agree about Locke have appeared, though, at hearings when the Delta's been threatened or when Locke's been threatened. So there is that commonality, and I think in the spirit of that, the reason why, again, it's not hesitancy as much as it is, at least my take, I've been with this for the years that I have. It's not a matter of taking sides and somebody wins loses, because a lot of times that's what's happening out here. Well, went to the board, they were on our side, or we went there and they weren't on our side. I think this is about certainly being, to your point, Mr. Brother Frost, trying to be equitable, recognizing that the situation is strained, and people aren't going to like each other because of something we do or don't do with this board. But I think it's really the challenge in a very diplomatic way to share issue. I'm willing to sit with folks, and we had 2 community sessions in which we heard from folks, and some of those folks were very pointed in their concerns about not only what the L.M.A. may or may not have done, but also the county's responsibilities. Again, even without this, we still have responsibilities. It's an important town, and all the rules apply to this town as does to other communities in the unincorporated area. And so, with that, it's not belabored, it's not because I don't appreciate the good work, and I'm sort of respectful of people's views, their L.M.A. board, as well as the pool that was taken. But that, nonetheless, in representative government, that's what this is. And as a representative, people can all disagree with me. But I still think, from the standpoint of what this county has invested, what we've asserted in document after document, what we believe in for the long-term viability of this community, it's important that, in fact, we're going to just lodge ourselves and leave the scene and let it to the association in a more private setting under another guidance of the law to do their thing, that we do that in a way that is clearly understood by all. And again, I'm just not prepared today to say that we're just going to, by a single vote, because this will be the last time we got to hear it, because we're done. Basically, what they presented, they're saying that's what we want you out. Not because they don't like us, but they want to go in a different direction. I respect that's the view of many of the folks, but it's not. I still think there's division in this town relative to that, and that hopefully the county may bring to bear, at least in reflection of what might come before us at a future date, something that would be more palatable to a greater number of folks in Locke. Maybe not, but I will give that some more time. In the meantime, we can live on what we have and recognize there are vacated seats, but they were talking about 9 versus 9 anyway. We can set this for talking about this in December if you like, so there's a time frame on it to share if you like. I'm willing to go to work on it, ASAP.
Thank you, sir. Supervisor Peters.
Thank you. For the benefit of the supervisors who have been here less time, I would point out that, Don, you had an appointee, your chief of staff was on this board for 8 or 9 years, and it made no difference. What, to me, having the Board of Supervisors involved, or the county, is that it's a great way for dissidents to say, oh, can't do anything, you've got to go to the county, you've got to have an issue, you've got to get on the agenda. It takes 9 months by the time they agree to get to do all that. I'm just making it up 9 months, but I know it's a long time. And I think having the county on this board is something that creates more problems than less, because it's a delay tactic by those who don't want to settle on an answer. That's why I think that we should be off. And pretty clear to me, the community voted on it, and I believe in that process, as you mentioned. So that's where I am.
Supervisor Frost.
My issue is that the board is representing the homeowners in a private homeowners association. And so they were voted into that position, and they, during their conduct of business, voted the changes to the bylaws, and it seems like it was clear that they wanted those changes. And I'm not sure it's our job as a government entity, a public entity, to participate in a private homeowners association anyway. I wonder how we got there in the first place. And I can understand what Supervisor Peters is saying regarding, it just creates one more level of, where people can go and delay things, and there can be added problems. This is hard because I sympathize with Supervisor Natoli, who has compassion for a community that's obviously struggling. But I also am not sure it's our place as a public entity to insert our, to supersede what that Homeowners Association board has voted upon. I know we have to approve it. I just think it would be better if it was just completely private and we were out of it. And it doesn't look like delaying it has got us anywhere. We've spent a lot of time and resources trying to fix this over time. So my inclination is to support staff's recommendation and support what the Homeowners Association is asking us to approve, which is the change to their bylaws.
Is that a motion, Supervisor Frost?
I can make if you want to make the same motion again, I can second it, or I can make the motion.
Okay.
I don't think it's going to carry.
Yeah.
It's not going to go anywhere.
I move we approve the staff recommendation, items 1 through 4.
Second.
Okay, I will say for myself, as I think it's clear what I said earlier, but I will tell you, if this comes back and we're in the same place, my patience is gone. And I would expect that it would be worked out among the parties. Otherwise, I will have a different tone the next time we hear this. But I am willing to, and would be interested in seeing Supervisor Natoli have an opportunity to fix this once and for all. And so I won't be supporting the motion at this time. We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
And the motion fails.
Supervisor Natoli?
Yes. Then I would offer a motion that we reject the proposed bylaws, or I would soften it, say to remand it back to the L.M.A. If we can do that, I know I can, but just because not, I see it. So then we reject it, send it back to the L.M.A. and need to work on the issue.
And I don't.
Do we need it? Do we need to do this?
You don't
Does
need
the
to-
motion
No,
fail?
but we do. I do want to give the direction to staff, though, that that were to happen, and that I would like it sooner rather than later to get this off our plate once and for all.
So the nature of the question I'm asking, I want to make sure I'm clear. The way I'm envisioning this is between L.M.A. that work with Supervisor Natoli. I wasn't envisioning we were involved in this process going forward. They have the grievances, they need to work it out. Supervisor Natoli's going to help them
Right.
to come to some closure.
Right.
I wasn't anticipating county council or staff from our office involved in that. I just want to clear
My intention, Supervisor Natoli can clarify, my intention was exactly what you said. I mean, clearly, county council's going to have a role in anything that comes before us. But as far as this portion goes, this is a role that is between the people who Locke and their supervisor.
And when they're ready, we'll agendize, and then our process will kick in.
I'm just hoping that it'll be sooner rather than later.
And I think it's going to be important because if we have a town meeting, I mean, supervisor can have a town meeting, but if there's a majority of the folks in the L.A. president, they're going to propose it for a meeting, and we'll have that conversation.
We will assist with all that. I just want to, I think, labor the point. We're not going to be the peacemakers. I think we've tried this. They need to work this out amongst themselves.
I hear you.
So if they vote it out amongst themselves, then it comes back to us to join in?
I think what we would envision is that whatever resolution comes, we'll present it back to the board, working with Supervisor Natoli. And at that point, the board can vote yes or no on which one.
After they take an action?
After they take an action.
Supervisor Frost?
I have a question for county council, and that would be, do we, as a public entity, have liability on a board where there's one person in town suing them over and over? Is there liability
Yeah, that's
associated with that?
On this particular case, I don't have an answer for you, but I will research it.
Well, they said there's one person that keeps suing them, and
Which I'm
you're
aware
on
of.
board.
Right, and I know that their board is liable. As it stands right now, their bylaws have been rejected, so we're back to, their amended bylaws have been rejected. So we're back to where we were, where we now have a member, we don't have somebody seated, but there is a member representing the County of Sacramento on the L.M.A. board. Whether that particular, on behalf of the county, that person brings liability to the county if they're sued. I know they were sued at something, I know June is here and can speak to this, but we had legal representation that was able to get the county out of that lawsuit, but I'll let Ms. Powell-Mays address.
Thank you, June Powell-Mays, County Council. That has definitely been a concern from our office because there is such acrimony and there is a history of litigation by property owners and against the Management Association board. The recent litigation that has been referenced named and did include the Board of Supervisors as defendants. However, our council was able to negotiate an agreement with the plaintiff and the county was dismissed from that lawsuit. The previous lawsuit did not name or include the County of Sacramento.
But when you're naming the board, if we're on the board, they're naming us too. Is that correct? Or just that individual on the board?
It depends. If we have a seated board member, a seated board appointed member, then there may be some liability that attaches. It just depends on the situation. But there certainly is the potential for that to happen.
That's a concern for me as well.
Okay,